It was 2,600 years ago. We were a vulnerable, small, and yet somehow prosperous and educated minority living in a foreign land. Generations had passed since the brutal Babylonians had carted off our ancestors as slaves. And as we sat in the capital of empire, our greatest prayers were filled with prayers for the world, as it felt like society was crumbling on the backs of a politics of mass deportations and the collapse of a global world order. 2,600 years ago. It was into this vacuum of power and hopelessness that a group of subversive, exilic Jews took up the mantle of a prophet who had been dead for 200 years and began circulating a defiant vision of hope. We have been summoned into this world, they said. We have been grasped by the hand and brought to just this moment, to open eyes deprived of light, to rescue prisoners from confinement, to redeem minds that have been locked into dungeons of darkness. We are here, they said, because we are to be a light unto the nations, to be a counter to the culture, to live a vision of the way that the world could be. Now, these people had no reason to believe that their words would be taken seriously. I mean, talk about imposter syndrome. They literally were pretending to be an ancient prophet. They had no reason to think that their call to hope would become part of our book of Isaiah and inspire billions of people for thousands of years. So, speaking of quotes falsely attributed to famous people, this time pseudo Mark Twain, there is a truism that history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And so if their world sounds an awful lot like ours, we shouldn't be surprised. This is the lesson of studying Torah. From the Bronze Age to sitting here at the footsteps of artificial intelligence, the core parts of what it means to be a human being have never changed. Jewish history has seen this again and again, from Egypt to Amalek, from Babylon to Christendom, that the world vacillates, not between left and right, but between moments when we as a society and we as a species are engaged in the project of us, of expanding the circle of belonging to include ever more people, and times instead where we descend into the project of them, of drawing boundaries and borders, when our focus is on who is other. Rav Kook, the mystic chief rabbi of the early state of Israel, taught that morality expands outwards like a fourfold song building layers of harmony. First, we sing the song of ourselves. Then we expand our morality to sing the song of our tribe, of our people, of our nation. From there, we work to sing the song of all humanity, seeing the divine image in every human being. And finally, we sing the song of the universe, and we all become vegans. Ask Rav Kook. But just as there are times, just as there are moments when we can feel our morality expanding, there are also ebbs in history where we descend into moral retreat. And it was in the midst of just such a moral retreat 2,600 years ago that those ancestors in Babylon took up the prophetic mantle and called us to be a light unto the nations. Because bringing light, being an image of the way that the world should be, this is a message This is a vision for times of darkness, for when the project of them has become the dominant project of humanity. Now, we have always had light unto the nations in the core of our DNA here at CRC. We were founded as a critique of the excesses and vacuousness of the Judaism of the 80s. We've always believed that those who have found themselves marginalized from the Jewish world, whether it be interfaith households or seekers or queer folk or Jews of color, we have always believed that these are voices that should be centered in our community. And when others were giving sermons with questions about Michael Brown, Rabbi Susan and Randy were in the streets of Ferguson, mourning and witnessing. But as Mordecai said to Esther, perhaps we were in fact made for just this moment, because God knows our city and our world are starving for reminders of the way that things could and should be. We are called to be a place that takes care of each other, where we support each other in moments of grief, where we celebrate each other's joys, where we model what it would look like to disagree without division. In a city where even tornadoes seem to follow a red-lined map, where even tornadoes abide by the Delmar Divide, we show up as a Jewish presence of comfort and repair. In a post-October 7th moment when the chasm between Jewish St. Louisans and Muslim St. Louisans seems insurmountable, we will become a bridge, sitting down with our neighbors in a genuine spirit of curiosity. And in a world where we look out and we see how desperately we need more mensches at every layer, at every level of how we raise and nurture and educate our kids here, we will be committed to making mensches. I often don't talk about this from the Bima, but I want to today, because I sometimes think that maybe when all is said and done, it's possible that the most impactful thing I will have ever done in my life, other than raising my 3 kids, is to help start a 2-week Jewish-style sleepaway camp for trans, gender-expansive, and LGBTQ kiddos. If you know anything at all about trans kids, you know the rate of suicidality amongst them is staggering. Because when you live in a world where who you are is a punchline, and when the biggest bully in your school is your assistant principal, it is easy to give up on the future. And so you can imagine how transformative it is to souls when for 2 weeks they exist in a place where they can just be themselves. Now, I have almost nothing to do with Camp Indigo Point today. I help to raise some money sometimes. So I don't deserve the credit for this. But after camp is done each summer, we get a flood of emails from parents, all shades of the same theme. We sent you a child who exists in black and white, they say, who sat alone in their room and whose only friends were strangers online. And you sent us back a kid who dreams in color. It's trite, but it is true. Camp is saving lives with marshmallows and campfires and a vision of the way that the world could be. This is the work that we do here at CRC, striving to model an expansive, audacious morality. Because it turns out you can't unsee hope. you can't unsee light. When you show someone a vision of how the world could be, they are changed forever. And change, the certainty of it and the possibilities that it brings, these are core to the work of Rosh HaShanah. It's notable that we begin our new year with a process of renewal, of Teshuvah. In English, these words, sin and repentance, chet and Teshuvah, they have the sound of failure, of inherent human wrongfulness. But the Jewish idea is different. Teshuvah isn't groveling. It's not self-flagellation. It's the sacred act of saying, I am not my worst moment. We are not our worst year. And tomorrow doesn't have to look like yesterday. Teshuvah doesn't mean we won't miss the mark again. The Hebrew word for sin, chet, literally means an arrow that misses its target. Teshuvah is a commitment to picking that bow back up, to adjusting our stance and to trying again. Not in spite of missing, but because missing taught us something holy. To do Rosh Hashanah is to engage in a radical act of hope. Hope that we can become a better version of ourselves, and hope that somehow, through acts of reflection and justice and a commitment to change, that we can collectively crack open the calcified heart of our world and open up possibilities and futures that yet seem impossible. To do Rosh Hashanah is to testify that the way that the world is and the way that we as individuals are is a choice, which means we can choose differently. We can choose even as the world slips into otherization and the project of them. We can choose to live out loud a vision of how it could be. We can affirm the dignity of the vulnerable, the marginalized, the immigrant, even while the world tries to push them outside the tent. We can stay in relationship with that family member, and through love and patience and effort, help them see how the words that they use hurt the people that they love. We can keep that rainbow sticker in our window and remind the kid who is a little different that they are awesome. We can insist with love and with grace that those around us speak of every human being as an image of the divine. And we can reject any language that dehumanizes, and that very much includes Palestinians and Israelis. And most of all, we can live in a way that inspires others, that reminds them that it is possible to treat each other differently. As Rabbi Hillel said 2,000 years ago, in a place where no one is a mensch, be one. So my blessing for us in this new year of 5786. May we be brave enough to keep singing the song of us, even as the world is shouting a chorus of them. May we be stubborn enough to keep widening the circle, even when it feels easier to shrink it. May we be fierce enough to unmask cruelty and tender enough to mend that which has become broken. And in this new year of 5786, may we be like those anonymous prophets in Babylon, writing hope into history and keeping alive a dream where our children and their children will again work to build a world better than our own, where no one is other. And may we never lose faith that the light that we kindle will outlast empires. Shana Tova.